a bunch of Excel spreadsheets or an existing analysis services instance, or a cluster of databases from which you're getting data, but you're moving to Power BI, and his organization did that over the past year and a half or so, and so we're going to have the benefit of him talking about his experiences. And as Julie mentioned, if you have any questions or you want to talk or you want to participate, just raise your hand and we'll figure out whether Murali will either pause or we'll address you and unmute you can unmute yourself at that time. So, but before we begin, before we dive into Murali's presentation, I had to give a little bit of background, a little bit of other information. Next month, Jonathan Feit will be presenting Performance Tuning Tales from the Field. Jonathan's been is a member of our user group for many years and is the treasurer of our user group and has a lot of experience in performance tuning and has spoken in the past on this topic. We're looking forward to hearing from him. That's next month, Tuesday, March 8th at lunchtime again. We'll be sending out meeting invitations through the user group. Upcoming future Data Saturdays and SQL Saturdays. You can see here there are SQL Saturdays and Data Saturdays coming up literally all over the world. June, there's going to be one in Croatia. I don't even know where this one in February, I don't even know where Pordenone, is that Italy? I don't know. Haiti. But anyway, the good news here is that we're starting to see a little bit more of these SQL Saturdays happening. I think with restrictions lifting a little bit, very slowly with restrictions lifting in the pandemic, we're going to see more and more of these. Job opportunities, Save a Lot. Save a Lot has been just growing their data warehouse and business intelligence team. Massive change going on there. I think as a consultant, I have been working there for about a year, and in that time, the team has gone from just a handful of people to I think almost 20 people. Great team, great management, really good opportunity. There are 3 positions available. Senior Data Analytics Engineer, which is going to be primarily Synapse and working with Spark, I think Databricks. There's data analytics. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a typo in here. So there's an analytics engineer, and there's also a senior data engineer, which is more on the engineering side in Synapse. And then the senior analytics engineer is going to be Power BI. And then they also have IT, a role for IT management specialist, which in a nutshell is like a business analyst working closely with the different verticals, different business areas, making sure there's a lot of data consistency and that sort of thing. If you are interested at all, don't sleep on it. Good team again, and if you are interested and you would like to know where you can get to these at the career portal at dayforcehcm.com, or if you're having any problem, just message me and I'll get you the links. As I gave a little brief intro to about the topic today, Murali, I think, is going to talk about himself when he takes over. So I'm just going to pass it over to Murali.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. And I will have strategic places where I'll ask you guys questions. You are more than welcome to. I mean, if you're raising your hand, hopefully I'm able to see it. If not, one of you guys start talking to when I'm asking. If you guys have any questions, I'll work.
Oh, and Murali, sorry to interrupt, but just to let everybody know, I am going to record this. So we're about to start recording now.
No, I already started.
Wait. Yeah.
Oh, you already started. Okay.
I started at the beginning when you started talking.
Okay. Great.
So this is being recorded.
All right, thank you. So initially, I mean, as you can see, my screen, I'm a big MCU fan, so I might have references of MCU in any of my demos or any training sessions or anything that I do internally too. So this is a demo slash experience sharing session of Power BI for healthcare basics. And I wanted to give a little bit of overview and a little bit of idea on what we're doing currently. So I'm calling it basics. If this works out, and we might have more based on audience interaction, what you guys want to see. Intended audience, I do have these just as a generic that I've known anybody who has worked have these kind of roles, but you don't have to necessarily be this. I mean, sometimes they're called programming analysts, data engineering analysts. So there are various names. One of the key things are visualization specialist. So even though I'm restricted to this, it could be anything else that might be doing a part of Power BI. I mean, you could be doing the data part. You could be a business owner. If you are using Power BI as a tool, knowing it from end to end is a little bit helpful. You don't have to know in depth, but knowing it, knowing all the features, the helpful things within Power BI from a strategy perspective and a little bit from a technical perspective is also very helpful on how you can create solutions. So talking about me, BI engineer senior, that's my current title. I've been at SSM Health for the past almost 10 years now, 9-10 years. Yeah. 10 plus years of experience in BI. Yeah, almost 12-13 years of experience in BI. Most of it is SAP Crystal Reports, and the past year and a half we've been transitioning to Power BI. I've done data modeling, unconventional data modeling, warehousing, ETLs, ELTs. So I've used Visual Studio for the SSDT for sending extracts, so doing ETLs, ELTs, sending extracts to external vendors, or creating solutions for internal people who are savvy or great fans of Excel and tons of data, even with an internal to our system. I mean, if you're in this location, or if you've been in one of the 4 states where SSM operates, SSM is a pretty big healthcare company with over 40,000 employees and roughly $8 billion in revenue. So it's a pretty big company. So I'm really glad and excited to be a part of this company for all this time. And I have, since this is a healthcare company, it is our main service is to patients. So everything clinical and EMR is what we do. So the database that I've been working on all these years, they're related to Epic, and they're proprietary database called Clarity. So Julie, who is a part of this organization committee, she is a DBA in my organization. So she'll tell you all the good things, and when I'm not there, maybe the bad things about me, about what we request from our team. And like I said, we do clinical stuff, so we understand data. I have like certifications in clinical data models of like inpatient lab radiology. I have some Cogito, or which is like the data warehouse of Epic, and so on and so forth. So I have some clinical. I don't have clinical background, but I do understand clinical data. Since my entire 12, 13 years of experience has been in healthcare industry. So and lab and radiology has been key core ancillary healthcare modules that I've worked in. So I understand the data pretty well. And it's been a great journey moving from SAP, or even we have other couple of tools, Cognos and ClickView, to Power BI. So I'm hoping I can share a little bit of that with you guys. So our key initiative started probably a couple of years ago, when there were, in the past 5 years or so, we have had some changes with our leadership and structure and everything. As a part of that, some of the new leadership brought in a movement towards Microsoft products. It helps a lot with how we integrate everything, right from the source application till you deliver the solution. I mean, we cannot really change the source application because it's an EMR, but everything that comes out of it from that point till the point we deliver, and even the experience that the user has with the tools that we deliver them in. We're trying to move towards Microsoft products, again, for better integration and everything. In this place, you can see that our other slightly more interactive or a little bit better capabilities that we know about, we see in ClickView and a little bit in Cognos, but our primary has been SAP Crystal Reports. So for an understanding perspective, we have over 300 ClickView apps. We have, I'm not sure about Cognos, sorry. We had over 4,000 Crystal Reports, Webby, and a handful of dashboards in Lumira. So, having to transition from 4,000 Crystal Reports, it's going to take a while. And our goal is to make sure we, I know in other cases, we have spoken to other healthcare people who have done the same thing, just to partner up a little bit and understand their migration process. One thing a lot of people were doing is they kept some of their existing tools and they moved some of their some other dashboards or items that were relevant into Power BI. But for us, we have decided to go solely with Power BI. So it is taking a little bit longer than we had initially expected, especially with the features that Power BI has. Sometimes the drawbacks that it has than what they're used to. It might not be the best thing what they're used to, but still, when people see everything in Excel and 100 million rows of data all the time, they want it, even though it's they don't need it, they still want it. So going back to that entire transition, that process from 4,000 Crystal Reports, and if you're used to Crystal Reports, you might know it is we almost created like an ETL. It's very similar to how you would create a project in SSDT, and you would create a file out of that. SAP, most of our work, how we have delivered, is creating that extract kind of feel to our reports. So we would give them lines and lines of data. The good thing about that is also they were able to connect directly to the source from the Crystal Reports. We had some checks and balances in the back end. I'm not going to go through that in detail. But so every user can run entire date range of data sets. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to see lab that happened like 10 years ago, we have that data in our data source, which is directly the Clarity. We have that data using Crystal Reports. We didn't have any kind of restriction, so it would pull data from 10 years ago. It would pull 10 years worth of data. I mean, it might not take that. The server might crash while it's running and stuff like that, but can they do it? Yes. So to move from that it's been a great deal for us to first understand what Power BI is capable. And you can see the list of items we were working with. We have used all of these to create like Crystal Reports, information design tool for the universes, and Lumira for the dashboard, Webby. If you're familiar with SAP products, and we have used Cognos a little bit, very tiny little bit, and then a lot of Click for interactive. And to move that, we have tried to move most of that. We're still in the process. We are moving mainly most of our products to on-cloud Power BI. We do have a report server version, which we initially started developing in, but then it became it was hard to scale and everything. So we switched to cloud immediately, and everything has been developed in cloud so far. We have over 50, 60 reports that are being used constantly. So mainly in Power BI Desktop, we use a little bit of Power BI Report Builder, which if you are familiar with, it's almost, for pixel perfect if we're doing invoices or, people who still want that Excel exportable data. Very few minor cases, we do give them that opportunity, an option. And then we do have also, as a very small percent, like I said, we used to at some point have this Power BI report server. Those are all of our tools, what we are moving from, what we are moving to. Before I go to the next slide, any questions about the migration itself, what our goal is for the migration? Really quickly, when I was talking about goal, so our migration, we were planning on, our licenses were getting expired at the end of this year. So we were hoping we would be able to complete it. So we started almost end of 2020, to start looking at how we can transition. And in this almost couple of years now, and with 1.5 years of active development, we're not able to completely go with that 2022. Like I said, we have like 4,000 Crystal Reports, 300 ClickView apps. So we want to make sure we give, we don't want to rush it to just get things moved from one tool to the other. Our end goal is to eventually move everything off of those tools, and then take it out of commission and let the license lapse, but have everything in Power BI eventually. Any questions again? Let's stop for a second. Sorry, I don't think I can see any hand raises. All right, next, quickly, I'll go through the Power BI guidelines. So
wait, so Meredith had a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was just wondering what your users miss the most that Power BI isn't able to do.
That is a very loaded question. One of the key things is, like I said, Excel. Everybody loves Excel. Every user you talk to, whatever format you give, finally, when they want to look at something, they want to also see the line level data, the transactional data they want to see. And they want it in Excel because that's what they're most used to. That's what they miss, I would say.
Thanks.
Thank you.
How are
That is
Murali, can I follow up on that? How are you guys handling that? Are you moving, are you pointing them to analyze in Excel? Or are you?
So we don't let them. So I do, in a couple of slides, I do have some items that I want to show, and maybe based off of that, I'll answer that.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, please spin that for a second. I'll come to that. Because I know that is the mindset that we want to get to, so I'll definitely get to that. Any other questions? All right. So as you can see, we came up with a list of Power BI guidelines. I mean, we have a ton. Actually, we have like a 25-page document, Word document, and we have like a few various other Word documents for guidelines. For not just with Power BI, we have like checklists. We have documents on how to create custom objects for Power BI and how it works best with Power BI and everything. So we created a lot of resources for Power BI guidelines. So first, in our strategy, in our vision, I feel like that was the most important. So there was a smaller group of people who took this task on. We spoke about the strategy coming from, how we had like folders and everything, and then to go into row level security, or how security was behaving in, or how we wanted to model security in Power BI. Starting from that to how we, I mean, even changing the mindset from Excel to how they can just use the insights. And also what that means is we needed to first figure out what is best, like what works best for Power BI. And we had to understand that. We had to set a list of guidelines. We had to say, use this, don't use this for our own developers. So they were ready to run with it when we said, okay, here are the 4,000 Crystal reports that are almost like an Excel spreadsheet. Convert that to where people can use those as insights. They can look at graphs and counts instead of just looking at a list of specimens or a list of what pathology reads mean. So there were a lot of mindset change for us first, and then we had to come with this guidelines that would work best. And also the good thing, and also slightly double-edged sword about Power BI is how they keep changing, especially because we are on cloud. They keep adding features every month, which is awesome. So also the thing is, if they keep adding new stuff, then we had to be on the cutting edge. We had to know what is there to be able to utilize those features, and also for our entire team to convince the business users to use a feature instead of what they're used to, like in Excel at this point of time. So some of our guidelines are here. Like I'll go through this very broadly. Like everything has to be in Power BI Cloud instead of the report server. Like I said, we had it, we took it out because it's not, maintenance was too much. So cloud is the best method that we realized. Data set and report should be developed as independent Power BI file. So, a data set will be created, stored. I mean, you have the capability of creating one PBIX file with the data set and also the UI that the user will consume in it. But we have, for reasons of reusability and stuff, we have decided to keep them separate. So once a data set is created, separate UIs have to be created so that it uses that one particular data set, and that way, moving all these 4,000 reports, we don't have to create like 400 different data sets. In fact, we could just create like 20 or 30 different data sets that will power like 400 reports. Use import query. So one of the key things is we wanted to most of our, so when I say guidelines, these are guidelines to make sure most of these are enforced unless there is an exceptional need. So if I say use import query to connect all the data sources, then normally our data source, all our data sets are import queries. What is the other data? Direct query, I'm sorry. Direct query is not a method that we prefer for any, for various reasons, for reason that, users might not experience the best trying to connect to the source back and forth. But again, various other reasons, but if somebody still has to use direct query, we also came up with the guidelines to have like aggregated model in like an imported query, and then probably in the case where they would want to go direct query, they would only want to view outliers of something. Like they might look at the specimens in a day, but if they are looking at an outlier, why only these 5 specimens had a higher turnaround time between the collection time and the result time than the other ones. So they only want to see those 5 specimens. So to view those 5 specimens outlier, we might use a direct query table. So those kind of exceptional rules we accommodated, but otherwise mostly import. So we use the Power and architecture of Power BI service to do all the heavy lifting and everything. Perform transformations before loading data into data set. Data modeling should be efficient for reporting and analysis. What that means is we try to make sure all the aspects happen, all of the changes happen within within the data itself. All the calculations and everything happen. Create a stored procedure, and we put it in a table on the. So I mean, it could be a data warehouse, so you could have a bunch of tables created from that stored procedure, because we already have a Clarity database. All our data comes from either that primarily, or we have external data sources. We try to merge it, put it into a data warehouse, you could call it, or a custom objects. So Power BI works efficiently, and also it's mostly point and grab from a Power BI perspective. Query folding must apply most, if not to most, if not all of the Power Query applied steps. So we do have some data flows. So other than that, everything else will have query folding. If you have query folding, what that means and everything, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's able to contact directly the source and give it a single query. And if we decide to do the next basics and everything, I will go into detail about query folding and stuff like that. Avoid native query. This was one of the hardest parts for us as developers. When one of you guys asked about what the users missed, this is something developers missed, because as Crystal Reports, we would develop lines and lines of code. All of our Crystal Reports would be like at least 200, 300 lines of SQL code. And of course, we use SQL. SQL Server is our backend. So all of our reports, 4,000 reports, time like 200 on an average, our minimum, I would say. So many lines of code that we have written. So it is hard for them to avoid native query, because we're trying to make sure not to have native query within Power BI. What that means, I will show when I'm showing the template in a minute or so. I will explain briefly. But so avoid native query. Don't put native SQL within Power BI. Put it in on the source. Put that in a stored procedure to populate a table and our data warehouse, and use Power BI to directly connect to that data warehouse tables. Enable incremental refresh on tables and dataset when using import query. Again, some of these aspects I will go over showing the template. What if you're not familiar with, probably, I mean, if you're using Power BI at any level or planning on going into it, you might know some of these concepts. So enable incremental refresh. So at the data warehouse level, make sure the logic is there to do incremental refresh of data instead of doing truncate and reload the entire data set, entire table. Incremental refresh, the same thing on Power BI. So there are multiple layers. One, the logic has to be applied. Incremental refresh has to happen every day. Things have to run. The stored procedure has to run on the server, on the source, where it pulls the data, calculates the logic, puts it in a table. And for us to consume in Power BI, we want to make sure the same thing happens, incremental refresh. So I keep pulling only the most recent, like only the last day worth of inserted date, inserted fields, inserted rows or updated rows. So I'm not pulling in like 30 million rows every day. I'm truncating and reloading, but I'm gonna just incrementally pull probably like 100,000 rows or something. And then finally, row level security is necessary. Row level security is very primary for us because we moved away from folder structure. So we have like affiliates who cannot view like the core SSM data. Affiliates are people hospitals who are connected to us. They use some of our services. They use some of our, like they tag onto us with the EMR and things like that, but they are not allowed to view our data. So row level security helps with that to make sure we have restricted that at the data level. So, people, material of which, if they're an affiliate or there's SSM, they still have the same reports, but they don't, they're not able to view data that they're not supposed to. These are our broad guidelines that shaped our entire strategy and helped us move forward as efficient as possible with our design of the data set or the UI. Because some of these made sure the UI was performing as fast as it can. Any questions on this real quick before I move on? Okay, I know I've been doing a lot of talking. Unfortunately, one of the key things being in a healthcare realm is data has a ton of PHI. So any of the cool things that we have done, unfortunately, I cannot show all of those things because again, of the PHI in any of the fact table that we can have automatically has PHI. Most of it. Now we're trying to, again, when I talk about the mindset of the end user, then I'll talk about why we are still having PHI in a data set. You would think there will be aggregated data, not any PHI. So any other questions? I don't see any. I mean, for some reason, I cannot see any hand raises or anything, I guess, because I'm doing a screen share.
Yeah, I don't see any hands.
All right.
But
So,
I'll ask. I could, boy, Murali, I
Sure.
could talk to you about. I could ask a question about or have a conversation with you about every single bullet point on this page. So you guys are doing everything in import. That means you said you have how did you go about organizing your data sets to best use that in-memory capacity?
So again, we have more technical guidelines for that too. Like I said, we have multiple documents. One that is core document that is just like an outlier document is like 25 pages long. So I can, if you want to talk, I can talk about each of these bullet points for an hour and a half or two. I've done content on each of these bullet points separately internally. So the key thing is about import. Again, we need two things. One is data flow. We try to use data flows to avoid some of the import queries limitation. for instance, we use, this might be a very trivial instance, but we store metadata about reports and like metadata, what the report is doing, the logic, purpose, owner, audience. We created a page for that and we show audience that. So whenever somebody looks at it, they know what that report is doing or what it's supposed to do. And also we have like change control that only developers can see. And again, those are things that we created using data flows import query. That is one thing. For transactional level data, we do have, I know in a minute, I'm going to go over a little bit about this Power BI service too. But our Power BI service, our licensing itself allows us to do a little bit of holding a ton of data. In short, we do have a premium capacity on Power BI service, so it helps us to use import query to the best as it can. That's the short answer. Power BI Premium we use, so we can import, in our case, 100 GB worth of data in one data set. So that's time. We necessarily won't even go that far up. Our biggest data set, I mean, this is after compression, because when it comes to Power BI service, everything is compressed and held very efficiently. So there's at least like a 10x compression. So if you see something on report server on the SQL Server, let's say 100 million rows is close to 100 GB, then you will only see 10 GB in the service.
Right.
So that helps a lot with our import query. And again, that for the UI itself, import query, that's very good.
So it sounds like you're not hitting a wall in terms of having the capacity in the Power BI service. You haven't reached a limit there. Okay.
No, we had at one point of time when we did not have premium Gen 2. This past year when they moved to Gen 2, when they released Gen 2 and they made it general availability, that changed a lot for us. Like I said, before that we had like 10 million, 100 million rows of data and stuff like that. So we were hitting that wall and we were on P1. So that caused us to move from P1 to P3, which is, I mean, again, if you guys are familiar with the licensing and everything about Power BI service, P1, you get like 25 GB of data. Before it used to be only 25 GB of data per data set. Now it increased to, yeah, P1 is 25, right? No, P1 is 10 GB and then P2 is 25 GB and then I think P3 is 100 GB. So we had P1 and then that maxed out. So we moved to P3.
Okay.
And once we had Gen 2, we had no problem. No, I mean, as far as data refresh and storing import query, we did not have a problem. Of course, memory was not not the issue. Compute was the issue.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? I saw a hand up and maybe it went down. Yeah, we have a hand up. Go ahead.
I have a quick question, and you may have addressed this already. This is Dee with SSM. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
I'm not sure if my mic is always clear, but how does the new migration impact those who write like VBA or VBE code in the developer part of Excel? Is it going to still be functioning properly?
So we are hoping that for most of our end users, all you can do, everything is done before, pre-aggregated, calculated, and put in app.powerbi.com where you can just consume it. You don't have to do any extra coding or anything like that. But if there's for some reason that you get part of the data and then you do coding, then I guess we still, a lot of these you can still export to Excel. The only thing is we don't let people analyze in Excel for any of our data sets at this time. We don't have power users at this time.
Got it.
That is something we still have to, I mean, we're trying to have some ownership and everything. And of course, that means people have to know how to use the data sets and how to analyze in Excel and everything. So based on that, we'll be working with the power users if they need access to data.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. No problem. Any other questions before I move on? And again, all these bullet points, a lot of them impact or come from how we design the backend. So knowing how Power BI works is very important for us as a data engineer or as a data warehouse engineer to solution the backend process accordingly for Power BI to consume it and work efficiently as possible. So please keep that in mind. Knowledge of tool is very important. Again, you don't have to go in depth about the technical details, but if you know broadly what has to happen and everything, solutions will be a lot more faster. We have seen a ton of those kind of situations where we had to go back and change some things, how we had designed to work best with Power BI. So again, as a general overview, this is one of our one of my colleagues put this together, so I'm going to shamelessly steal from him. But you can see, I'm going to just go through this pretty quickly. So we create our PBIX files data set in using Power BI Desktop. So we build the data set, we publish it to PBI. We have three different workspaces: development, test, and production. All three are in premium. At this time, is when I was going to talk about the P1, P2, and P3. So we do have development and test on the same P1 nodes. So they're sharing, but again, just because it is developer only, or when somebody's going to test the reports, we really didn't want to put them in a bigger premiums work space. So these two are in the same shared P1 premium. It's not per user, it is just premium. Production is in a separate premium capacity, and that is P3. So that 100 GB is very helpful for us. It has mitigated a lot of our issues where UI was just waiting for a little bit to refresh and things like that. So that helped a lot. But again, going back to this, data set gets published first to development. And in our case, we have like a specific, sorry, give 1 second. This thing, let me show you guys our powerbi.com so you can kind of see what that is. Again, I'm not going to open any particular report with the BHI and stuff like that. So all you do is go to powerbi.com if you're not, again, familiar with it. app.powerbi.com is the place. And then once you go there, you'll have a view like this. Actually, you'll have a view like this. End users will be only able to see the apps, but we have workspace access. So if I select one of my workspaces, you can see most of them are, if not all of them are premium workspaces with this little diamond on it. So professional billing, yeah, let me show this. So you can see we have a ton of reports, content in reports, and I mean, this is development. So we have some dashboards too for testing, but data sets, we have a ton of data sets, and you can see immediately data sets have this same DS PRB. There's somebody who put in the wrong data set here, but just a acronym for the workspace, and we have the source, and we have a specific naming convention for data set that we see in the data set itself. So if you see the content, you'll see all those dataset related UI parts, but we normally don't have any. I don't want to click on it because sometimes we do RLS, so we do have to put that UI there to check that our RLS is working as intended. So I don't want to accidentally click on something that might have PHI. Again, these are the data sets. We publish those data sets to this development folder, and then we create reports. I'm just going to view lineage, so you can see that we create reports based off of those data set. So you can see that, I mean, this dashboard came from this report, parts of it, and then I created that report from this ARPB data set. Yes. How do I go back?
We have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Janice?
Hello?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear
Yes,
you.
hi.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So you are using two premium capacities. How do you, what's your what development process, oh no, deployment process do you use?
Great question. That's the next thing I was going to talk about too. So once we put data sets, we do use deployment pipelines. Initially, we were thinking about using ALM Toolkit. However, that was just, I mean, by the time we decided to use it, deployment pipelines became general availability and they were working best for us. So what we do is use deployment pipelines, the same place. You can see in here, we have deployment pipelines. Then, so not everybody has access to this. I mean, I do have some elevated permissions. So when I want to deploy something from one from one environment to the other, we use deployment pipelines. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I don't.
Yeah. Yes, so you use deployment pipelines, but that's within one capacity only, right?
Only-
How do you move to the other capacity? How do you
no,
move
even-
the data set to the?
No, even between capacities, you could use deployment pipelines. That's
Oh,
how we
really? Okay.
test the prod.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd be
And
interested to know how you did that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not the admin. I'm not the Power BI admin. I do have admin rights, but I'm not the Power BI admin, so I'm not very sure how to show you that. Other than just showing the deployment pipeline itself. Professional billing, yeah. So you can see that even though development and test are different. Are different capacities, I could still do that between test and professional and prod. Prod is a different capacity, sorry. Dev and test are the same capacity, but you can see that happens normally. But then test and prod is different capacity. So still deployment pipelines, it works. However, unfortunately, I don't know that part of setup and everything since I'm not an admin and I was not a part of that. So I'm sorry, I cannot show you how to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's possible. Yeah. No problem. You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. So again, I mean, as in this process itself, you can see, where is it? So, we put the data set, we publish it to development from Power BI Desktop, and then we use the deployment pipelines to go between sorry, we use deployment pipelines to go between the environments. One of the key things is also you can see that these DS creates a DS report UI, so we call, but none of those are migrated. We usually don't migrate that. We don't really need that UI. We just migrate the data sets and nothing. You can see only the reports are migrated to the next step. All the DS reports are not in the test or production, just so production is ultimately clean. with only the data sets that we need and the reports that we need, and we don't have those DS datasets, DS dataset related UI that you would see. All right. So that's our movement between environments. And one of the key things also, I mean, talking about source, I should have mentioned this before, but we use our primary source is SQL Server, which is on-prem. We do have Azure instances too. So when we do use Azure, I mean, we don't have to go through this, but we do. For SQL Server, we use a gateway server. Initially, we had a smaller server, I think like 16 GB, and then that maxed out pretty quickly, especially with the amount of data that I told you about, 100 million rows and all. It didn't handle it, so we had to upgrade it. We have a VM with the gateway server itself we had separately for this on-prem to PBI service. I think we have a 64 GB right now, if I'm not wrong. So we do have data, for all the on-prem data sources, we have the gateway server setup. We try to use the same server name on the front end. So I mean, it is all set up. So everybody uses the same already preset setup gateways. We don't create our own personal gateways or anything. And then for the cloud sources, it's pretty simple. You just connect to it. It's really not a gateway. And then the next part is the report. Like I mentioned, we have two separate PBIs. Sorry, let me quickly check and make sure I'm not running too behind. Okay, not too bad. Next part is the report. You can see that we already created the data set. So we use the report, and using the data sources in the report, we connect to the required data set, the DS underscore the workspace abbreviation and blah, 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 whatever the subject matter is. Once we connect to the data set, we build the report in either Power BI Desktop or Report Builder, excuse me. And then we publish those reports. Again, you can see all the reports that we have other than DS, we have all those reports. We publish it between to prod. So of course, everything gets created in development. Test usually is for user testing, and prod when they're able to consume it as an app. So that's the report design, what we do. And most of our report design, again, is in Power BI Desktop tool, another report builder. Deployment, I just showed you. Thanks to that question. It's basically what this entire slide is. I was going to talk about. We promote data sets, reports, and dashboards, not the data set related UI parts. And then the same thing between test and prod. Then we have the same kind of sources, as you know, and we use deployment pipelines, which is what I was going to talk also about. And this is one of the key things earlier. One of our colleagues from SSM, I think, asked a question about if they're going to be able to use Excel to create VBA and stuff like that. So natively, what you get out of Power BI itself, I think you can analyze using Excel, but for that to happen, we need a power user or power viewer role. But we're trying to come up with something that, either we can give the power users the capability to be a contributor. And these are the Power BI suggested roles. These are the roles that Power BI has come up with. They gave what each of these roles can and cannot do. So this is the list of how we are planning on using that. Currently, all of our users are either they can only see the apps, or they can see and read data from the workspace itself. So that is the only way you can use that data set, create your own report within Power BI workspace. So it's going to be a little tricky. I don't know how you'll be able to do it, but somehow you can do it. Unless, I mean, you're very familiar with APIs, you could do some API calls, pull the data from dataset, not even go into Power BI, just do it using PowerShell or something else, C#, or yeah, if you're familiar with Postman, you could try doing Postman using PBIS, stuff like that. So I'm not sure how that works, but definitely something you can figure out. Our Power BI admins have admin content, have admin rights on the content management for all the workspaces that we created. So basically, the difference would be whenever you're here, you'll be able to see the admin portal, which is oops, sorry. Where is that admin portal? So then I'm able to see what the settings are and everything. So make sure also you manage all these settings and everything for the admins, Power BI admins, if you're there. We have some basics ones. Like I said, one of our multiple documents has the list of settings as like an Excel. So we know what we selected and what the recommended is, and if we need to change based on any new feature. So please keep that in mind. So all three environments, Power BI admins are admins. Developers, we have elevated permissions on QA and dev. You can see as a member. There are some identified developers outside of our teams that do have a little bit more elevated permissions as a contributor, and then most users are only app viewers. Any questions on that real quick before I move on? Again, this role is in like Microsoft Docs. You can look at it if you're having thoughts about what to do. I think the next one is the template. So that's the Missouri templates. That's temporary plates, not that one. But I'm going to show the template. So let's see, because we're show me state. I'll show you some templates. One is the data set template. Let me get this off. Any questions so far? Okay, so this is our dataset template. I'll stop right after when we go through this as well for more questions. And we don't have any, what is that? Sorry, PHI or anything like that in the templates. Whoops. So Power Query, I mean, even here you can see, actually, before even starting dataset template, I have to give actual credit. So we went through some Power BI training with one of the, I mean, I'm not trying to sell anybody, but I'm just trying to tell you who came up with most of this idea. And we were able to use that very well because organization was one of the key things for less maintenance. So to know that we can be organized, means we would have lesser maintenance and lesser headaches. So we have Power Pivot Pro or someone did our training for Power BI. When they did, one of the persons, his name was Chris Haas. It was a great guy. He came up with some of these ideas, some of the organizational parts that we just took and ran with. So let's start with the basic one from the template. I will tell you which parts he had. He gave us straightforward. The rest, how we influence ours. So one of the key things is, you see all these folders. Again, for organization, please make sure, I mean, if you put things in folders, it's easier for you to know and connect and talk to only those things. So we have fact folder. We don't have facts here because it's a template. You can put all your fact tables in here, dimensions tables in here, measure tables in here, parameters, all the parameters that we have created. RLS, we have a couple of data data flows for RLS, a few for the report info and change control. So this is for the report related information. Whenever I show the report and all, you'll be able to view what this means and everything. But so the first level from an organization perspective, folders, creating folders, very important, very helpful in organizing. And what we want in a template, we had to go through and see what basic items do we need to. So we had to put in our server name or database that normally people would connect to. This is our on-prem server. Range start, range end for incremental refresh. So we had mandated incremental refresh. So if you're doing that, range start, range end, and report ID parameter for using, we had set those report info change control for that to work for each of the reports that we create. We had to use that. So we had to come up with what a template meant for each of us and how basic it can be. Because we could have modular templates where it could be like lab template or professional building template, but that became a little bit more tedious. It was almost as good as creating a data set. So we got away from creating modular templates and a more generic template where someone can start, but at the same time they can start. They would probably say like a half hour to an hour that they would be, if they were creating all these and organizing them. So it's a quick initial bounce board to start with. And at the same time, this way we could make sure that some of the standards were kept as well. Like I said, we need to use, we had documents that say how to name your parameters. Incremental refresh has to be this. That's Power BI standard. And some other things that we had. Going back to dimension. Well, this is one of the key ones. And this, it would be in most, if not all, of our data sets, because there's some kind of data aspect to any data set. And thankfully, within Clarity itself, we have something called date dimension. That's a table. So we didn't have to create a separate date table. But if you don't have one, I highly strongly suggest, if you have a great data warehouse, you probably already have this. I don't know what it's named, but having a date dimension is very good. You have a ton of columns in that that are very relevant. Again, all these are useful at various levels, and you can see there are like 50 columns or something. All those are very relevant columns. We use it for various graphs and things like that. So anything that you can think of, like year, month, year of the week, so on and so forth. But this is very important, date dimension. If you know Power BI, it is one of the key tables to reduce hierarchy and put it in a table format. Otherwise, your data is a little annoying looking. So that's one of the key things, again, date dimension, and then all these parameters. The measures table, again, I will go through this when I go out of the Power Query, but two tables created, one for data set and one for report. And then row level security, we created a row level security table. So we use groups that are created within AD. So our Windows 80, our Power BI admins, they create groups. And those groups will have access to specific regions. In our case, healthcare data, our restriction is based on the region. Like I said, affiliates cannot view SSM data. So we are separated by region. That's what it's called, and kind of like location. You can think of it as almost like a geographic location. We have separated them as a separate entity. So that's what this row level security is. All it is it holds like a bunch of those regions, and then the user ID. And then again, like I said, we have created these groups that we assign some people I mean, the Power BI admins do that on the Windows 80, and it gets synced in 80, and then once 80 has it, then I mean you just get it in data flow because there's a connector between that and the data flow. So this row level security itself is a data flow. You can see that we're pulling a Power BI data flow, and the same thing SSM logo. I mean, I will show you in short why we have that, but that's also a data flow. There is these other three items are sorry, this and this, the report info and change controller data flows too, very similar. We created backend tables. We have a whole data model for storing what a report meant, like purpose, owner, audience, and description, logic, and everything. And change control, version, who changed what, the report that was changed, the promotion day, and so on and so forth. We put in data in, not here, but we put into backend tables. Developers have access to put in data into these tables, and we maintain this so we can see at various places like SSMS or here in Power BI when a report was changed and how it was changed. So these basic tables and stuff comprise of the Power Query part of the dataset template. And again, one of the key and most important is creating separate measures table, one for dataset and one for report. Because if you're familiar with pulling metadata about a Power BI dataset, you can do that. We have tables, we have structures that pull, we have API calls that pull. I do that on a daily basis. I pull some information every day to check if new data is being added to Power BI service using PowerShell. Those APIs, I'm able to pull data about the measures, what tables are used, and the Power Query. When we see Power Query, you guys might be familiar with this too, but you are able to see an M query. What that means is just it gives you an M query. This is a language, so it does something by pulling in the tables and whatever type of transformations you're trying to do. So if you're familiar with M query, so we use the data in that M query. It's loaded, stored as a JSON file in the backend. So we use that to, call the API and get the data, extract the data out of the metadata about the Power BI data sets into our data model, so we know what is there, what has to be changed, especially when something changes in Epic for us. They usually tell us that this table, this column, this field is being deprecated or something, then we can quickly find what that impacts us and so on and so forth. So again, why did I say all of that? It's easy for us to organize and get all of that in certain format. So data set, measure table, created a dataset measure table. If you don't know how to do that at a different point of time, maybe I can go through that. It's really simple. There are a lot of resources online too, but create a measures table separately. And then one of the key things is I have, starting of each of the measure, you can see at rate. This is one of the key organizational stuff. Other than, even putting the measures within folders, is to keep all those in, start the measure naming with at rate or hash or currency. So these 4 items was that person, Chris Haas, that I mentioned a little bit ago. Due credit to him. He was the one who came up with this. This has helped us a lot in organizing and knowing without having to look at each and every data measure, each and every measure. When we look at it from the data model perspective itself, we immediately know what format it is, what we are trying to do, and so on and so forth. And then we added a few other things, but still, to make sure when you quickly glance at measure, you're able to accommodate, you're able to understand a little bit, not too much. I don't want you guys to write an essay in the name of the measure or anything, but these are things that will definitely help you, hopefully. in your organization to organize things better. The same thing, report measures. This you can, so that we can differentiate, like I mentioned a little bit ago, Power BI, our files are separated by data sets and reports. So whatever measures we put in data set will be here. Whatever measures we create within the report will be only in this table. So then we know, when something is modified or changed, then we know where it has impacted, where we need to make that change. Any question on any of this data set template before I go to the report template? Again, some of this is more on the UI side, and I know we have a mixed audience at this time. So if you feel left out, I'm sorry, we'll definitely at a different time, there will be the back end part of it too. Sorry, I do see somebody raising hand. Is that a recent reason?
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, hi. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi. The report info slicer, I kind of miss it. So are these information about your filters in the report?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
The report info slicer.
Oh,
yeah.
So yeah, report info is about, again, the metadata of the report itself. So what the audience purpose is. I don't know if I can show this. Wait, I can. Probably it's just the test data that I put in. Okay, all right. So, I mean, it's just a list of, purpose, owner, audience, and description, stuff like that. The slicer is something that I created for the report. When I go to the report template, I will show it to you, which will be like in a minute. So the slicer is for me to display this data somehow.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions about the template? All right, so let me go to the next part, which is the data set template. Report template. Where are you? Report template, right here. Okay, so you've seen the same things, all the same things you see here too. So basically, a report template starts from this. We already have this pre-template. Whenever somebody needs to switch to a different data set, all they would do is, go here. Come here, data source settings, and then they would just select the data set they want. Currently, this particular template, its report template itself is connected to the SSM dataset template that we have published in our developers workspace, just so we have a template to start with. But then I can connect to any other data set that I want to, that I have access to. And then I'll be able to see all those items, all the relevant facts and dimensions for those items, for that data set, sorry. So you can see it starts with our, again, very basic. There's really nothing you can see too different than you could see in a blank Power BI desktop report. We have just added the logo, and this is a logo. Again, that's where we use this SSM logo table. It's a web URL. It flips it on or off based on if it's an affiliate or not. So if the affiliate is there, then the web URL itself points to a blank space. So this is just a blank space. And then when it's not an affiliate, it's an SSM person, then it points to a web URL with the SSM logo. So that was the workaround that we had to come up with, to just have something where they can see the logo. Only SSM people can see the SSM logo. And then the title of the report is a text box, and we have these important links, which we have pre-populated with. And this is a link. This links to the About page here. So when I click on it, it'll go get to me there. But before I go there, I do want to show quickly the back reset filter button. So I know there's a reset to default in Power BI itself, but we have still given that reset filter button. Also, we have the filter icon that can open a filter slicer page. So we have a list of, again, preset slicers there. You can add, drag and drop any of the existing dimensions or whatever you're trying to do as a slicer, and those slicer will already be in the format that we have set up, because we have, if the theme blue color and everything is already preset in these slicers, so when you drag and drop, it'll automatically show up with that color. And then again, of course, you can see that's a hidden filter page. We almost initially when we started creating, we had some that were not a part of this, but once we started having this template in a finer, refined manner, we put it in here. The other two pages we had were very relevant again for the about page. Again, that icon will bring us to this about page, and this is where you see that purpose, description, owner, audience, and logic. This is a very simple table visual, and you see the contents of that. When I click on purpose, it shows me the purpose and logic or audience, whatever I'm looking for, it just switches it. So that's what that slicer does. That report slicer, you can see that this particular item is looking at that report slicer field. If you look at the report slicer itself, the data behind it, all it is just these purpose, description, owner, audience, and logic are the names in it. Yeah, so purpose, just so I can have this. And when I click on it, it toggles between those, almost like a slicer. So that's why that's there. But then we also have the service area region access to, so people can click on it and know what their particular user has access to, what regions they have access to. That is what they can see. Like, we have hospitals in like Wisconsin, Oklahoma, like this St. Louis, Illinois, and also Mid-Missouri is a separate region. But so people might not have access to other regions in certain workspaces, so they may not be able to, I may not be able to see Oklahoma data, and so on and so forth. So this helps us takes it back to a report in the Power BI service that gives them a list of everything. Again, everything else, the logo, the name, and everything. This is the back button in case they want to go back to the previous page that they came from. And finally, one of the key things also is the change control. This is for not just the user experience, but for the developer experience. I always constantly talk more about the developer experience. So we put in a bunch of information. Again, in the backend, we have a bunch of tables. When I'm going through at a separate point of time, maybe, I don't know, I could talk about this, but there's a data model that we create and just have a bunch of information about what changes were made and what the ServiceNow, we use ServiceNow ticketing, or we use DevOps, Azure DevOps. Recently we moved to Azure DevOps, so for requests we use that. For tickets, for incidents, communicating with other teams, we use ServiceNow. So whatever it is, we put all this information, and again, all these are in the backend tables, and we pull it using data flows into a particular view, and then we display that as change control here. Now that's very important for our developers, like I said. That's all about the report template. So these are the key things. So every time somebody starts creating a UI, they have all these aspects already. All they would have to do is reset this report ID to whatever their new report ID is. And that report ID is the Power BI GUID that you see when you go to Power BI on top. You can find it. Where's my report? Yeah, usually So when I click on a report, which I'm not going to, after this, it'll show report slash something, something, just like how groups, this is the workspace GUID. There's a report ID GUID that you have to use here. That's all about the report template too. These are the basic things that we have to package and give to people. It's almost like those UPS boxes that you see. So you don't have to, recreate a box. It's already created. You can just put your things in, ship it. Any questions? All right, I think I have, I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, but those things I had already spoken about in the previous parts when you guys asked questions about what the business user mostly miss or what they've so far missed. That's the, moving from Excel to Power BI, they want every line detail. Even though only 5 specimens miss or they become an outlier, they still want to see the entire 100,000 specimens. They want to see to make sure that that's accurate and the outliers they pick out and they can find it out. So that has been, that's what I was going to talk about later, but that is the problem on aggregating data. But now that we have more end user buy-in and stakeholder engagement, we are able to aggregate data. So we're slowly moving towards that step where we're giving them aggregated insights and not worrying about giving them Excel level data. So I was going to show about an infographic real quick. Since we're running low on time, what I will do is I'll talk about the last part, and then I will come back to that infographic. Whoever wants to stay on for another 5 minutes, it'll just be 5 minutes. So after I'm done with this, I'll go through that cool thing if you're interested. So the last part is just UI, UX, and DX. So UI and UX, user experience, user interface, user experience, and I want to talk about DX, which is the almost like sounds like DAX, but developer experience. So all these templates, all these standards we have set up, we had made sure that happens. So not just the user gets their insights and data, but also the developer has a great process, a quick process, an efficient process. At the same time, maintenance is not heavy on all the users. Some of the things that we did on from a developer perspective to increase our developer experience is to, like small trivial things that you might not think of at a very higher level, but combining multiple visuals, reduce the maintenance, increases the performance a lot of times. Like, you can have like 3 different card visuals or 5 different card visuals. If you are showing 5 different card visuals in a separate, even like top to bottom, you could talk to your user, change their mindset to having it almost like in a row and just using a table visual. So yeah, whenever I'm using a visual, all my visuals, instead of having like 5 different card visuals, if I use a single table visual, I might be able to use 5. Put those 5 elements as a row. Of course, you could create a measure to calculate all that and put it in a row. So that way, one visual has to talk to your backend queries and so on and so forth. And the other thing is to use bookmarks and Navigator. So there's a bookmark Navigator recently that came out in November 2021. So if you use that, a lot of times bookmarking becomes so much easier. How do I show this? Oh, sorry, insert. This is happening. All right, so the buttons, you have a navigator for page and bookmarks, so use those whenever you create bookmarks. If you have a navigator that automatically pulls in your bookmarks and everything, or page navigator, if you have multiple pages, it creates a navigator and it automatically updates and everything. So things like that, so you don't have to create buttons, because previously we would have like one button for each of the, for example, bookmarks. We would have 5 different bookmarks. You would have 5 different buttons, actually 10 different buttons, because one for a selected state and one for unselected state. And we would have buttons for all that. And we'll try to toggle and create bookmarks for that. And so it would be really a big hassle. But now we can reduce that using the bookmark navigator and also using the right type of bookmark. Maybe next meeting I can start with something that or maybe I can show it real quick during this meeting too. Visual names and groups in selection pane. So whenever you have selection pane, whatever you have in the selection pane, please make sure you name them properly. Let me show this real quick. I do have screenshots, so I don't have any data to show you guys. So let me move this over. I'm almost done. So please bear with me for a second. So this is our current dashboard that we were trying to create, and I took out some of the data. Most of it is test data that you see. So I took out some values or some names of what we're trying to accomplish. But if you focus here on the right side, it's the selection pane that we have on our UI. So every visual gets a predefined name. Instead, we just started grouping them accordingly, like in rows and then like 3.1. So like third row, first column, and so on and so forth. And you're naming what that means, like a card, an indicator card that shows, TBD or whatever it is. Then a title card that has the title of it, the table that has actual and goal or shaped background. So whenever somebody looks at the selection pane, I mean, you can click on what it is and figure out what it is. However, that is like one extra step that you have to keep doing for each and every visual. That takes time. That is when somebody looks at something that all is like 500 cards, just like card. It's really when somebody opens up that Power BI file itself, developer is going to have a very frustrated day starting with that. So to get a better developer experience, such things have to happen. And hidden slicer panels, like I showed in the report template, we have that panel icon, have hidden slicer panels. So, user also doesn't have to constantly keep looking at it, but also at the same time, you have enough real estate to do other things. And as a developer, I know where the slicer panels are, all the slicers are, and everything. Then customize page size. This is one of the very less known or less used things for a developer. And with this, I'm going to stop. So normally a page is in Power BI, a page has size that is 16:9. That's the normal page size. So it works like a landscape in any of your mobile devices or your laptop and stuff like that. A lot of people, what they don't realize is to use custom. So you can do a horizontal and vertical scroll based on that. So my normal default pixel is this much, but I could increase it. So that way now what it does is it makes it ugly like this here. But when it goes to Power BI service, all you'll have is just a scroll bar down so people can do a vertical scroll. And if I do the same thing with the width, then there'll be a horizontal scroll. So you're not restricted by the real estate really, as long as you know this and you can kind of make your user realize that, we could fit more visuals as long as it doesn't impact your performance. Any questions? I know we're 3 or 4 minutes over probably by now.
I think this is wonderful. Oh, wait, Janisa has one more question. Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is not related to this template topic, but how do you manage your users? So you use AD groups, right? But how is there a way do you automate the access requests?
Access request automation is a totally different topic. So briefly, I'll tell you this. So end users during the migration, what we did was we took the list of users. We had those modules, remember I told you like lab, radiology. So when we created workspaces similar to those modules, we took those users who had access to the folders, we gave them access to the workspace too, the same way. So we already had that list, but to do a new user or something, currently we're working a lot with our stakeholders. At this time, it's still a little manual, but what we do is we ask for service tickets, and Power BI admins add them to the list manually. Again, they put them in the groups for each of these workspaces. We create workspace for each of the groups. Sorry, we create groups for each of the workspaces, and then we add those people in that workspace, and then we use RLS to make sure they have the right data visibility and everything. But the Power BI admins put those users in that group. They do that on the Windows 80. They do Windows 80 groups, and then that also translates here. And how you do RLS itself uses your user principal, and so we're able to type both of them together. Role of security. So we're able to, so user principal name, you see people in SSM, and then the group we created for affiliate Oklahoma, Beaver County. So that person has access to that particular region. So this is the region ID in our case. It could be something else for you. I don't know what level of access you're looking for, but so this group gets access to that particular workspace. So in each of our app, we have a list for that particular workspace. Sorry, where can I show you that? Here. Where's that workspace? Oh, wait, no access. So you can see that PBI admins, of course, and then improvement developers, and then PBI developers, that's us, have access at various levels.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
I have a question or a comment.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to wait till the end, but I'm mostly curious about how you've done a fantastic job over at SSM, formalizing a lot of the development processes with the templates, with best practices. How did you begin to formalize those processes, and how do you continue to keep those processes formalized and in control?
The processes, I will have to talk in like two different parts, because one is internal to our teams who work with Power BI and maintain it and everything. Our team is called SDA, the System Data and Analytics team. So how we did that within our team and how we are interacting with others are two separate pieces. The one that we did within our team, whenever the leadership came up with this, with the direction to move towards Power BI and all Microsoft products, we had to strategize everything. We sat on like numerous meetings with the leaders, the admins, and we were like, can we do this? Can we not do this? How can we do this? And getting the adequate training at the right time about DAX, or be it, even resources like GynaCube, great resource, Power SQL BI. Those guys are just amazing because they have so much knowledge. They do all these things at a consulting. I mean, GynaCube is Microsoft people, and SQL BI is people who created Power BI. Using those resources to identify what is necessary for our team to succeed and how to step these migration in the right direction helped us a lot. That's an overview. If you want more technical or how we did a specific step, we can also talk about that. That is within our team, an overview with the external teams, and our team is we had to strategize. We had to make sure first we had the right stakeholders and the right stakeholder engagement. We had to make sure we knew this tool and its capability and why we need to aggregate data more than just giving them 100 million rows of Excel sheet every day. So we had to learn everything. We had to absorb a lot. And then we had to champion all this. We had to say, we want to aggregate. And I necessarily won't say that we have completely 100% done it. It's definitely a work in progress. We're still engaging with a lot of our stakeholders, and change is really hard for a lot of people, especially, people who have seen data. Now, if you say, I'm not going to give you the entire data, I'm just going to give you the aggregate, just going to give you the count, they're not going to be very comfortable. So it's been a little bit of, slow transition, but we are trying to engage the main stakeholders and say, hey, good, now I understand it is uncomfortable, but if we give you aggregated data, it might just take us 5 days to accomplish this report. If we do with the insights and everything, but if we, however, want to pull the entire data with 100 million rows and everything, it might take us 50 days. That's just an example. So it takes us 10 times more to get the aggregate data, make sure it works. We're able to put that, and the performance doesn't impact the user experience and everything. So to do all this, it'll take 50 days. Do you want to spend that time, or do you just want the data? And you have to just start believing us that we're giving you the right data. You can test, we can do validation and testing how much ever we want. So we have tried to put in like a validation phase, and we're trying to, like I said, more stakeholder engagement and work in progress.
Thank you.
All right. And I know it's beyond time, so I don't want to hold anybody who wants to drop off. But the one last thing, and this is, I know this would be just a bonus thing. So I did an infographic just using DAX. So if you're used to Excel, if you're going into Power BI, DAX is an effective, very efficient query writing, basically data analysis expressions. So just using functions. So if you want to take a look at it, so if you already have some experience with DAX, or you're going to Power BI, you can take a look at it. And then with this, I will be done. Okay, so this is how it looks. Basically, I have this is just a slide, but basically, again, during our DAX programming class, we had a data set that they gave, and right after we were done with it, I was just playing around because I know, sometimes as developers, we might have some knowledge about some kind of coding might just excite us. So the DAX just excited me. So in this particular case, you can see that I have a visual with a bunch of infographics. This is not PHI data or anything. This is from Contoso, the open data set that you can get from when you're using Power BI, basically, I think. This is about bike sales. So everything you can see has a quantity. So infographic, basically, if you are familiar with any kind of infographic, what it means is you're trying to represent something as a block of another item. So in this case, I'm just trying to represent the quantity of tires and tubes sale. Number of tires and tubes sold, 17,332. To show it as an infographic, it's just these number of stars. I just randomly picked stars. You could pick something else. But what I did mainly, so this Q infographic is the one that uses this DAX. So look at this beautiful thing. One of the key things you might have noticed is most of these are like black stars, except for the very last one that's a white star. I'm going to go through that real quick, what that means. And also these slicers that you see right here, I created some what if parameters. Again, if you understand Power BI, if you have already worked with a little bit, then this would be easier for you to understand, which is why it's a bonus part. So when I created a measure, I used all the necessary references. So quantity is the part that I'm looking at, but I stored some other variables. I mean, of course, since it excited, I mean, the thing that it excited me is that creating variables within DAX and everything, because I looked at this particular measure almost like a function in SQL. And you know how we use outer apply for functions. This would become something very similar to it. So we want to have variables and everything, but we want to make the measure very concise. Otherwise, you know how outer applies works with, if you have like 5 outer applies, it's gonna just be a performance hog on your query, unless some of the SQL experts here tell me otherwise. But you know, just a very similar thing. This excited me a lot. So one of the key things I did was putting in some values. So grain, block, and block line. Just keep that in mind for a second. When I look at this, I mean, I've put in 250, 5 and 5 here, but I mean, that's just as an example. But if I go back into my visual, you can see that each of these star, what that means is representing 250 is the grain, and I saw there. But I mean, I switched it in the slicer. But so right now it is representing 100. So 100 as a quantity is each filled star. And then here in the block, it's saying 5. So each of these blocks would be 5. So I'm not looking at just a line of stars, meaning nothing. So now it's a little bit more defined for me. So 5 of the stars form a block. And then 7 of these blocks form a line. So after 7 of these blocks, it's going to go to the next line and show me the same, you know, star or whatever infographic in the next line. So that's what these input for me. And again, this particular measure, I have a huge code that I iterated and reiterated. Very simple, just figuring out what that means. And I'm using the Unicar, so Unicode character, that Unicode number, that means a star or a space in the case where I'm trying to do difference between, you know, 2 blocks. There's a small space, and then between each line there's a line, you know, return line character. So all those are included, and it becomes, this one thing becomes a block. And you can see I have code written to what that means. So it includes a block, the stars in the block, and a line, a full line. So in here, what I'm calculating basically, again, is the number of blocks that I would need, the number of lines that I would need with full blocks. So when I go back out here, come on. So I mean, until the very last line, I just, if I know the number of lines that I have filled out blocks, then that's the first step. Then I just multiply that number by the character that I created for that block line and everything. And then the next step is identifying how many blocks in the last line that are filled up, and then putting those many, multiplying that number. And then final is in the final block, how many filled out stars, and then having a final unfilled star for any leftover. So that's what this all does, and you get this beautiful number. And again, this is for that. I multiply this by the number of lines, so then I get all the filled out lines, and then I multiply the very last line, how many blocks are there, filled out blocks. This is the one last block that has the number of filled stars. Again, I will make this code available in case you guys want to also play around and test with anything that you might have. And again, just for your visual thing, I can show that, you know, I can change this to 7, and then then this will change this. You can see that it changed. That 7 stars make a block. And I can change this down to where 5 blocks make a line, so there are only 5 blocks in my line, and so on and so forth. So just a visual representation of the number as an infographic, if you're ever using it. Okay, sorry, I think I went, what, 20 minutes over. Gosh, if anybody's even on. Thank you for being patient. That's all I have to show. Any questions? Finally, before I let go of you guys.
Murali, thank you so much for presenting. Really appreciate it. There was a lot of really good information here, and I would love to talk to you more and have you come back and talk to the group more about some of your experiences with Power BI.
Okay.
And we'll talk, and I think we've talked about that, and you even kind of alluded to that you might be willing to do that in this meeting. So
Yes.
we'll talk afterwards, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you next time.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. And also to everybody else, please feel free to reach out to me or any of my other colleagues at SSM, so we can share the same experience we've gone through, or what kind of reports or UIs we are trying to create, and the user mindset, and any kind of topics that we have spoken, we have touched today. If you want an in-depth conversation with any of us, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do you guys want to stop the recording?
Yep.
All right.